Hello and welcome to Castle's Corner. I am Coach Castle and joined today, as always, by Mr. Matt Morton, the natural Mr. Olympia handicap version. And today we're going to be talking about biomechanics. We're going to be talking about improving your performance with them and why understanding how physics affects you specifically is so important, as that is the study of biomechanics, basically how forces affect living material, in this case, how gravity affects your anatomy. So Matt here is in the process of learning biomechanics. It's quite a lengthy process. It's quite complicated. So one of the biggest things you can do when you're learning a difficult, complicated subject like this is to get a mentor or somebody who knows more about it than you. So you can just continuously pester them with questions. Anybody who knows me knows that my mentor for many years, and still occasionally is, Mr. Doug Brignoli. And I was pestering him all the time. Most people don't know this. I got the copy of his book, the Physics of Resistance Exercise, about 3 years before anybody else did. I had him email me the rough draft of it before it had been published or anything else, long before he'd even been on Rick Drayson showcasing it. It's a long story to it. This isn't the time for it. But anyways, Matt, how has biomechanics been going? What kind of questions do you have? Because if you have them, I'm sure anybody else who's learning it or might be interested would have the same one. So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I always wanted to kind of break it down to the most simplistic value. And if you can't breathe, you can't do anything. So your breathing IQ, a lot of people will get it confused if they've trained in yoga or some kind of martial art or just thinking about their posing practice. So, I like to delve more into that.
Okay, so real quick, just for everybody, Matt's referring specifically to the biomechanics of breathing, or basically how you breathe, how you inspire, how you expire. This is something I touch on quite a bit, but let's get into it. So you already referenced the breathing IQ. So what a breathing IQ is, it's basically how efficiently you're breathing at rest. So just without drawing the little bit of a complicated chart, basically, you can either be a vertical breather, which means you're breathing, filling up your chest cavity, but not actually filling up your lungs. You can be a horizontal breather, which is somebody who lowers their diaphragm, fully inflates their lungs. It's called belly breathing. Or you can be a horizontal breather, which is kind of a combination of both. Now, 95% of people in the world are actually vertical breathers. Now, what a vertical breather is, as previously mentioned, is somebody who basically breathes with their chest. So you're expanding your chest, your shoulders are going up and down. The issue with this is you're not actually getting full breaths. Now, a horizontal breather is somebody, as I mentioned, who only breathes with their belly. Now, when they breathe, I apologize, you can't see it, but I'm breathing with my belly right now. So just imagine myself making myself look pregnant and then taking it in, looking pregnant, taking it in. This is correct breathing. So there's 6,600 different mammals in the world. Humans are one of them, and humans are the only animal that breathe with their chest. Now, the reason for this, it's only come about the last 55 years. Now, I'm going to try not to get too complicated with this, but essentially because of clothing styles and culture. So guys want to look more handsome. They suck their belly in when a pretty girl walks by. All these chunky, fat women who think that they're healthy, they wrap themselves up in these waist trainers and slimmers and Spanx and everything else, basically just turning themselves into a compressed sausage. And obviously they're unable to breathe correctly if their midsection is compressed. If you are flexing your abdominals, if you are trying to reveal your abs, trying to show your abs, if you're sucking your belly in, you are unable to breathe efficiently because you cannot breathe with your belly or lower your diaphragm if your abdominals are flexed. It's impossible. You have to relax your abs. Now, all this complicated talk about vertical, horizontal, hybrid, really, it's pretty simple to understand. You just always want to breathe in with your nose and you want to fill up your stomach. Now, most people, they don't actually do this. So just very simple explanation as to how to do it. And then we're going to get to why it's so important and a bit of the mechanics as well. So how to do it is just take your hand, put it on your belly button, and then make sure that your hand is going out and in when you breathe. And make sure that your shoulders and your chest isn't moving. That's it. It's very simple. It will take time. here's the biggest thing is you have to be consistent about this for a long period of time. It's going to take about a year of mindfulness to do this. The mindfulness literally will be you being mindful of breathing in your nasal cavity or breathing in your nose, into your belly or lowering your diaphragm, and then exhaling however you want, nose or mouth, I don't care. But again, it should be about a 5-second. So each minute, essentially, you should be taking 6 breaths. Each breath will be 10 seconds. And again, you want to always be inhaling through your nose. Now, getting into the actual mechanics of this, or do you have questions before I move on, Matt?
No, go
Pretty
right ahead.
straightforward? Okay. So getting into the mechanics of this is pretty simple. Your ribs, like everything else, are levers. And in order to inspire or to breathe, to inhale, your ribs connect on your spine. Okay. So you guys could see your ribs all connect on your spine here, and they wrap around. And when you breathe, all of them basically, they rotate. They just kind of separate apart from each other and they slightly rotate. This is accomplished in the back. There's a little cushion that they rest against, and they just kind of slightly rotate in their joints. Now, in order to breathe efficiently or correctly, you have to be breathing with your diaphragm, number one. But typically, most people have actually very weak cores. Now, when I say cores, I'm actually only referring to breathing muscles. Now, there's a lot of these. I'm not going to list them all, but basically any muscle which is attached to your rib cage is a so-called breathing muscle, or required to inspire and expire, inhale and exhale air. Now, the reason actually humans are so cool is because unlike with reptiles, they control how much they exhale. They don't control their inhale. Humans, we actually control our inhale and our exhales. It's pretty phenomenal. And that's because we have a diaphragm. Reptiles don't have one. Now, what this diaphragm does, it kind of looks like an upside down toilet plunger made of like meat, if you will. And its job basically is just to kind of go up and to go down. Now, of course, this will be, moving inside of you, if you will. Now, these muscles have to be trained, and a lot of bodybuilders, they actually train their inner abdominals, their transverse abdominals without even realizing it, because they do something called the vacuum pose. It used to be more common. Nowadays, the vacuum pose is definitely not as common because so many people are taking human growth hormone, insulin, and getting these disgustingly distended guts. But if they don't have that, and they're, let's say, a classical bodybuilder, they'll be performing an abdominal vacuum, which is literally where you lift the diaphragm up and out of the way, allowing you to suck your belly button in towards your spine. It's quite an impressive looking pose. I talk about it all the time. Even before I learned anything about respiratory training or the biomechanics of breathing, anything, I was doing the vacuum pose for years, every day, because of Rich Piana, I think, mentioned it, and I liked it. But anyways, just getting back to the breathing, how breathing affects your performance in sports, bodybuilding, or just in life in general. Well, I mean, it's everything. So you could literally destroy your posture with how you're breathing. If you're a mouth breather, for example, just if you breathe with your mouth instead of breathing with your nose, you're going to get severe teeth crowding. You're going to get jaw deformity. Your head is going to slump forward. You're going to get kyphosis in your back. Your posture is going to get ruined. You're much more likely to be a vertical chest breather. And of course, all of these basically compound into you having a really crappy life. You're going to have all kinds of aches and pains and strains. You can't breathe. You feel like you can't get air. You wouldn't be able to even exercise, really, because you're breathing through your mouth, which is not an efficient way to get air. So because, just to keep it simple, when you breathe in through your nose, you mix the oxygen through your nose hairs, which filter it, and they actually mix it with nitrogen oxide as well, which means that the air that you're breathing in through your nose is actually much more available to the body. So basically it goes down into your lungs, into these little sacs called alveoli. They're just these little, think of them like balloons that mechanically process the air into your bloodstream, and they fill these up. Now, every human has every healthy human, I should say, has roughly three-quarters of a tennis court worth of alveoli in their lungs. It's all folded up on top of each other. It's pretty cool. Now, here's the thing, is most of those are in the bottom half of your lungs, which is where most people do not breathe. They typically breathe in their chest. So if you're breathing in your chest, you're already sacrificing the amount of oxygen that you're getting. And a lot of, I mean, I could go on about this for hours. This is a big subject, but basically just giving you some reasons as to why you should always be breathing into your nose and into your belly. This is some of the reasons. Now, sports performance wise, when it comes to breathing, there's just, aside from the actual breathing training aspect of it, let's just leave that out for maybe another video. If you are efficiently using oxygen and you're getting more oxygen, you're supplying your muscles with more oxygen. You're going to be fatigued significantly. Like it's going to take way longer to fatigue, way longer. Doesn't matter if you're doing an endurance run or if you're doing reps in the gym. The same exact guy, let's say he's doing a tricep extension with 30 pounds. You take him, he's a mouth breather and he breathes with his chest. He's going to fail at, let's say, 15 reps. Okay. You let me train him for 2 weeks, nose belly breathing, and train his diaphragm. You put him back there. His muscles haven't, grown that strong in 2 weeks' time. But what we've done is we've changed his ability to breathe, his respiratory, and he'll be failing at 30 reps. He'll literally double the workload because he's controlling his body. He's not letting his body do what the hell it wants to do. He's saying, no, give more oxygen to the muscles. I'm breathing this way to facilitate that. Use it as a tool. And of course, if you're breathing efficiently throughout the entire day, you're going to be much healthier. You're going to have way more energy throughout the whole day. I mean, most people get that mid-afternoon slump. You don't have to have caffeine to remove that. You can just do a couple rounds of bellows breathing, which is just where you oversaturate your body with oxygen, and you'll have a massive energy boost. Recovering in between sets. In the gym, a lot of people, they don't know what to do. They just kind of sit there, they play on their phone, distracting themselves instead of staying focused on the workout. Well, number one, you shouldn't have time in between sets anyways. You should just be bouncing exercise to exercise if you're doing it correctly and efficiently, my way. Sorry, had to say it. But if you are, for some reason, just doing nothing in between your sets, sitting there staring at your phone on the floor, why don't you focus on correcting your breathing, slowing your exhale down, basically like restoring your central nervous system as efficiently as you can to baseline homeostasis so you can return to maximum output. But this is all accomplished by correcting your breathing patterns, strengthening your breathing muscles, strengthening your diaphragm. Now, the breathing IQ, just going back to that, all it is it's a simple chart. It's a graph. You take a measurement around basically the bottom part of the lower part of your ribs, take a measurement on the inhale, and you take a measurement on the exhale. And then you kind of put this into a mathematical equation, and it'll tell you how good of a breather you are according to the chart. You can be like a very bad breather, which would be mouth and chest, or you could be a very good breather, which is nose and belly with a very large expansion and a very large contraction. So that's what I'm always trying to be. That's what I'm trying to get all my clients at. But the thing is, you have to actually train it. Just like you would train the bicep, you have to train your breathing muscles. You have to take the time to do it. And like with most things, if you just tell somebody to go train their breathing muscles without explaining the reasons and your justification for explaining why they must train their breathing muscles, they're not going to do it. If you explain how it will tremendously improve their performance and how it's only going to take 5 minutes a day, well, then they'll probably likely to do it, at least if they're serious about improving their performance. But just back to the actual mechanics of breathing, I suppose. Key component, specifically with breathing, is flexibility. If you have a locked short chest, or a locked short back, or a locked long back, or a locked long chest, or all this means is that your muscles are inflexible. I mean, I'll just leave it at that to keep it simple. It's not technically accurate, but you have inflexible muscles. Let's just put it that way. If you have mobility issues, if you literally just have difficulty opening and expanding your ribs, you will have trouble breathing. Now, these issues typically come from 3 things. They come from, 1, an entire lifetime of breathing incorrectly, in which case, you guessed it, it's going to take quite a while to fix it. Because just like if it took you 3 years to get fat, well, it's going to take you at least a year to get unfat. This is kind of how it's going to work. I mean, depending on the weight, anyways, how much fat you put on. But it's the same thing with breathing. If you spent your whole life destroying your breathing and you have a habitual pattern of breathing very, very poorly, and you're used to breathing very, very poorly, well, number one, you're already shortchanged. So you're already starting at a point of low willpower, extreme fatigue, and a bunch of other things, which are only going to get better as you practice the breathing. But it's going to take you time to repair your breathing because you have to build the habits. then build the mindfulness, and then develop the actual strength. And your breathing muscles, the diaphragm, is again, there's no difference between the diaphragm and the bicep except the location in the body and the function. And the diaphragm needs to be trained just like anything else. But the main issue with the diaphragm is it doesn't have a pain receptors. It doesn't feel pain. There's no lactic acid there. You know what I mean? You can't feel when your diaphragm's fatigued. So you have to do it with somebody who knows what the hell they're doing, or you have to take it really slow, basically. Just to touch on another quick aspect of breathing in sports, a lot of you know this, VO2 max. You want to improve your VO2 max. It's very important. It's just lung capacity, how much you can inflate your lungs. Obviously, the more you can inflate your lungs, the more flexible your ribs will be anyways. But I just wanted to mention that real quick. I'm sure some people were thinking it. The second way that you can get this is due to an injury. So I myself have had many injuries where it severely compromised my breathing. Everything from cracked ribs, obviously will really screw with your breathing if you have cracked ribs. Every breath is very painful. It kind of sucks. It doesn't matter. I've had a lot of issues with breathing, and I've had to learn how to do like workarounds with the breathing. So that's a reason. So you have to have rehabilitation for that. And lots of times people will get like the rib will heal, but then they'll keep the same shallow breathing patterns that happened when the rib was damaged, because for 3 months long they were, because it hurt really bad to take a deep breath. So then they maintain that kind of state of anxious breathing, and they keep themselves in a state of high anxiety constantly. So again, not good. It's not even related to sports, but if you're in a state of high anxiety, it's not good. And then the third way is actually your way. So they're not your way, sorry, but they're handicapped. They're in a wheelchair. They're paralyzed, they're quadriplegic, they're something. So again, it's an injury, but in this case, it's kind of a permanent injury. It's an injury where they're kind of fucked, like they're stuck in this position. So if you are, let's just say, disabled, and you're forced to remain in a chair for large periods of time, or you're forced in a particular position, lying down, any of these kinds of things, it will severely compromise your breathing. And that's because all of your breathing muscles are going to be atrophying in that position. So you actually have to pay special attention to your breathing. So all the athletes I coach, all the people I coach, they all get breathing training. I mean, I don't care if they want it or not. They all get it because it's necessary. It is what it is.
That's your building block.
Yeah, I mean, it's like coming to see me to get better, and I don't talk about your diet. It's just as important, So, but specifically, when I get somebody who is handicapped or disabled, I mean, I'm working with just two right now, one handicapped and one quadriplegic. But again, their primary focus is improving their respiratory function at the moment. That is their primary function, and once that's better, then we can focus on other things. But the reason that is their main priority at the moment, on top of supplements and sleeping and stuff, that's their main priority because that's their biggest problem. That is their biggest health concern right now, is their breathing. Because when your respiratory functions go to shit and you start, all that goes bad, your whole body goes to shit. Everything is connected. You can't have one thing gone to shit and not expect everything else to go to shit too. That's just how it works. So I think I might be getting a little bit off topic here. So let's take it back to biomechanics. What else you got for me, Matt? About did I cover everything with breathing you wanted?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. How about actual physical biomechanics and exercise? Do you have any questions about the resistance curve or determining load magnification?
No,
Anything
actually,
like that?
no, because of my sports management and kinesiology and physiology background. No, I got it. You hit an apex, and that's your absolute high point, and then you're at the point of diminishing returns. And
So how would that relate to, let's just say, I mean, just teacher to student time here, I guess. So where is the apex during a bicep curl, for example? Where would the apex be?
I would think that, from my understanding, I've always felt in my bicep curl, I know I'm hitting an apex right at the central point of contraction and hold it. You're not getting a whole lot of resistance at the bottom. You're not getting mad resistance at the top because you're just resting.
So perhaps I poorly phrased. Let me rephrase. In a bicep,
please.
It's my fault probably. So in a bicep curl, when you're performing a bicep curl, let's just say correctly biomechanically, at which angle is the forearm going to be in the center of the resistance curve or the apex of the movement?
I would think somewhere about between 45 and 60%, depending on your range of motion because of a physical limitation.
Okay, so 90 degrees. It would be at 90 degrees. So the reason it would be at 90 degrees is because at 90 degrees, the lever is the
Oh, I
furthest
understand
point.
the question better now. Where are you
Okay.
getting
Yeah.
best?
So anyways,
Yeah, right at 90.
and that's because at that point, the load is the furthest away from the pivot point as possible, meaning it's the longest possible lever. That would be the high point, regardless of the fact that it's on its side here. It doesn't matter. The resistance curve is also on its side. So it would just be the center of that. Perhaps just a different example in sports would be if you were to throw a ball, the apex in this particular case would be the height where the ball then started to descend. So that's when gravity wins the battle. You throw the ball up and forward, and gravity's acting on it. And the apex would be the point where gravity wins, and it starts coming back down. That's the high point. In terms of the bicep curl, you're standing doing a bicep curl, and you got the load here, elbow here, and you lift at the 90-degree point right here. This is the apex. The resistance curve would be looking like this. I hope that makes sense to everybody.
Oh, of course.
But anyways, just moving.
I was trying to get it to where I was trying to understand the route you were asking.
It does help. Well, it really helps to have paper and just making it two-dimensional in some ways. It's very difficult.
I would have just drawn you a bell curve.
Yeah.
You know, like a supply and demand chart looking graph, and then just drew you the bell curve and said right here in the center.
Yeah, it's
So
obvious.
180, 90, 0.
Mhm.
At 90 degrees. That's right where you're getting the best.
So so far since you've been learning biomechanics, what I guess has surprised you the most? Like, has anything been surprising, or have you seen something and been like, oh, well, that made sense, but I've never heard it worded like that before. Now it makes more sense, or anything like that?
To pinpoint an exact part would not do you proper credit. The whole thing's been eye-opening because I said, you know, I grew up around a family full of construction workers and engineers. So it's always, how do you build? You know, where is your fulcrum? Where is, you know, your pivoting? Where is your stress analysis going to be built into? Where are you getting your, the whole gambit? And honestly, some of it's just been reinforcing what I already knew, because a book is only going to teach you so much. You have to get in there and start applying what you learn, because just because you're an ectomorph, or, you know, predominantly, or a meso or an endo, or, you know, or a combination, you know, because all of us are a combination of, well, you have to be able to apply. You can't sit there and say, well, I'm 5'9" and I weigh about 180 pounds. You know, I have narrow clavicles, so I'm built like Frank Zane. I should be able to be built just like him. No, each person is different.
Well, yeah, if I would, I want to step in here. This is actually the great thing about biomechanics. It's really the wonderful thing. And I've spoken at this at length. I've debated many people. I shouldn't say debated. I've disproved and debunked so many fucking people. It's not a debate if they can't actually have a talking point against.
Oh, no,
you.
I agree.
So here's what it is. If you're tall, if you're 6'5", if you're 8 feet tall, if you're 4 feet tall, if you're 2 feet tall, if you're a child, if you're an 80-year-old adult, if you're 500-pound man, it doesn't matter.
It all works the same.
Physics or physics. You want to do the best exercise for your muscles. There's only one best exercise. Your anatomy is identical to my anatomy. Gravity affects your body just the same way it affects my body. I have heard so many people who so-called specialize in training tall people, or specialize in training.
It's a marketing gimmick.
It's the silliest shit I've ever heard. Oh, if you're tall, you have to do this exercise. If you're short, you have to do this. And you have to do more frequency for your muscles if you're tall, with your biceps, because you're tall.
That's not true. That's simply a false statement.
It's just again, to all you people listening, this is complete Nonsense. Obviously, it's complete nonsense. Just because you are tall or short, your anatomy and gravity doesn't care. Your muscles look the same as mine. They have the same exact job. They respond the same. You want to maximally load your levers inside the correct resistance curve with the correct frequency, and that is all you can possibly do. At that point in time, it entirely depends on who you chose for parents. And if you picked bad parents, that's your fault.
Well, no, really, I think the biggest eye opener is picking the one best exercise. You know, if you were to choose one, which would it be? You know, and that's been helpful. And
You know
doing,
what? I'm sorry. I just wanted to say something about that real quick. When I first came to biomechanics, I loved the fact that there was just a single perfect exercise. I loved the fact that you could make that mathematically determined. It wasn't guesswork. I loved the fact that once you learned it, you knew it. But for almost, I want to say almost 2 years, I did the same exact, same exact exercises. Like I did dumbbells, bicep curl alternating. I did the exact things. And it
right.
wasn't until I had a lot of clients, because I'm a simple person. If it's the best thing, I do it. I'm a very simple person. But I had a lot of clients who were like, I'm kind of getting bored of doing the same exact exercise. Now, understand, it's not boring if the intensity is right, but it is like monotonous. Like every single time I go to see Coach Castle, we're doing these 8 exercises on Monday. We're doing these 8 on Wednesday. We're doing these 8 on Friday. Sometimes people, it's very monotonous. So what you can do is you take your learning of biomechanics a step further, and then you start learning that while there is a single perfect movement, you can do that movement a large variety of ways if you play with the forces of resistance and the actual angles. So you can do a bicep curl upside down from the ceiling if the resistance is between your feet or originating from a pulley on the ceiling. You can do it sideways. You can do, there's
Oh,
many ways you
absolutely.
can do it. So I just wanted to jump in with that, because I get that question a lot. Well, isn't it boring just doing a single movement continuously? And it's not. It's just really not, because you can do it so many ways.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it just is what it is. You have to be inventive, but it's great to be able to sit there and say, I like to debunk the myth of you can shape a muscle.
Oh,
No, man,
Jesus.
your freaking muscle is built the way it is. It inserts. Your muscle bellies are what they are.
Mhm.
You know, nothing I'm ever gonna do is gonna give me an 8-pack. I don't have the structure for it. I have the structure for a 6-pack, but not an 8-pack, not any of that business. So,
Just to speak on that, just a tad more to clarify a couple things. Just interesting tidbit. Most of these people who say shaping the muscle, or you can make the long head of the bicep larger by doing this particular movement, or by turning your foot a specific kind of way or whatever, mostly what they're doing is something actually called active insufficiency or passive insufficiency, which is actually a negative thing. So, for example, I see this all the time. I have no idea where people get this idea from, but the preacher curl. You guys know the preacher curls where you do one of these guys here. So the thought here is that by extending your arm like this and then doing the contraction afterwards, this particular angle is going to give you a better peak in your bicep. Well, in actuality, because you're pre-shortening the muscle by me lifting my elbow up,
making it worse.
exactly. I'm pre-shortening the muscle. So because I'm pre-shortening the muscle, I have less room to contract. I have less force to contract. It's a more difficult exercise, meaning I'll actually be doing less weight, but it will feel harder. So it's actually a less effective exercise, which feels harder, which forces you to use less weight, which is not going to give you as good as a result as a standard bicep curl.
Actually, most people, I swear to God, they do partials with it. So they're only doing half of a rep to begin with. So they're putting on this 90 pounds or 135 pounds, and they're barely moving the bar. And it's like, uh, it's popular, at least from my group, all of us Desert Storm guys and things like that, because that's what we learned because of Larry Scott and Arnold Schwarzenegger made it popular. But what the fitness industry doesn't tell you is nobody does it like they were doing it. They were hanging on the arc. straight over, so it's more of it's a spider curl with a straight bar or a cambered bar.
Well,
And,
actually, even with that
and that's
though,
a
I mean,
barbell curl.
but
They're
well,
just
actually,
picking up in the air and doing a barbell curl.
no, actually, see, you're wrong about though, because even when they do the lean over the bar and the dead hang with the straight arms, here's the issue. The issue is the location of their torso. That's the problem. So their torso is in the same exact position, regardless of whether their torso is against the bench and their arms are in
I
front of
got you.
them, or if they're hanging, the torso is the same location. It's the same thing as a preacher curl. It's the same thing. Make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Because
No, 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 no,
again,
no, no, no. I get
yes,
it. Biomechanically, yeah. I thank you for that, because I'd always, when I looked at it, I was like, that's essentially a barbell version of the spider curl.
but again, even barbells, you don't want to use barbells,
No, use a dumbbell.
Well, you want to
Robbie
use,
Robinson, who arguably had the best arms, period. He was a multiple time Mr. Olympia for the 200-pound class and under. And he had amazing arms. And he always said, I never did barbell. I never did camber bar. I only used dumbbell. And I'd only do one arm at a time until I got too tired. And then
but
I'd
the,
do the two arms.
but I mean, just to be specific, not to be anecdotal about it, to be specific, the reason why you don't want to use a barbell is because of something called bilateral insufficiency. So when you're using two dumbbells, you have something called cross education occurring, and you have a
Yep,
unilateral direction of resistance, which is both arms just have to think
absolutely.
up. They're just thinking up, both of them at the same time, but it's independent limb movement. When you're holding a barbell, both of your limbs are working together. Number one, there's a neurological thing that happens. I'm not going to get too technical here,
Your
but
strong
essentially,
arms helping your weaker arm.
your strong arm's helping your weaker arm, but actually both arms are weaker because
Oh,
they're
sure.
working together.
Absolutely.
They're able to generate less force than if they were working independently, because when an arm is working independently, you're able to actually focus more on the arm, generate more force. It's just a neurological phenomenon. I'm not going to get too much into it, but just unilateral training is always better. That's why it should always be cables or dumbbells. Plus, it's much easier to control the resistance and everything else when you're doing it like that.
You're less likely to get injured.
And if you're using a barbell, again, you'll most likely be compromising your range of motion, and the tendency to use momentum as well when you're using a barbell is far greater. You don't want to use momentum. It just subtracts from the load that you're trying to work with the muscle. I'm just seeing the time now that Matt, I got to end it for the day, bud.
That's great.
Let's end it. I hope you had a great 4th of July, everybody. This is the day after for us. So I hope everybody had a safe, happy 4th of July. Matt, thanks for coming on here. And we'll do another one of these.
Pleasure.
We'll do another one next week, probably chat some more about biomechanics if anybody's interested for that. Again, as always, leave in the comments below. I'll include a couple little clips at the end of this as well for you guys to check out. Check out the description for all of our information, all of our socials, all that happy shit. We appreciate all the support. You guys know that every time you like, you share, you comment on these videos, it's amazing for us. It's good for us. It lets us know that we're doing a good job. And of course, the YouTube algorithm loves it too. And it sends it to even more people who can hear our wonderful voices explaining how awesome we are. So I hope everybody has a great day. And that's it for us.